Thank you for joining us today for our seminar in the Journey to Science series at Onondaga Community College. This seminar is sponsored by the Bridges to Baccalaureate grant. Today, we are welcoming Dr. Katie Becklin, an assistant professor at Syracuse University, where she studies interactions between plants and soil microbes. Dr. Becklin completed her doctorate in biology at the University of Missouri. In her research, she is now especially interested in how soil microbes mediate plant responses in response to global change. Science has taken Katie all over the country to study plants in salt marshes, grasslands, montane forests, and alpine ecosystems. Outside of her research, Katie enjoys sports of all kinds, but especially Taekwondo, as well as hiking with her dogs, Dex and Ranger. Now, as you're watching, if you have any questions at all, there's a question and answer button at the top, and you can type in your questions at any time, and I will be sure to pass those on to Katie, and she will answer them live. Thank you for sharing your time and story with us. Welcome, Dr. Becklin.
I still don't see myself in the big window.
We can see you.
Okay, just making sure. All right, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to get to talk with all of you about my journey in science and perhaps hear a little bit more about your journey in science and questions that you might have. So I'm actually going to share my screen because I have some photos that I'd like to share with you today. Just give me 1 second. All right, so like I said, I'm going to be telling you a little bit about how I got started in science and the different places and different paths that this journey took me on. And I think it's important to start where I started. So I grew up in central Minnesota in a tiny town that has had about 18,000 people, so very, very small. I grew up in a family with 5 kids. There's me in the middle. Both my parents were teachers, and so we, spent a lot of time as kids, really kind of valuing asking questions and learning about new things. Because we were such a big family, our family vacations were the cheap kind, where we would spend our time up in northern Minnesota canoeing and hiking and camping and doing all these kinds of things that really just helped me develop a appreciation for the natural world and kind of our place in this world. So this is sort of where my love of ecology and love of nature really started, was, from when I was a young kid in Minnesota. From the very beginning, I went back and I looked at I had this folder from my elementary school days where I had written down what I want to be when I grow up, and I looked at it, and in first grade I wanted to be a teacher just like my parents. By the time I got to 4th grade, I didn't know what I wanted to be. I thought maybe a teacher, maybe an environmental specialist, maybe a vet. I really had no clue. So one of the points that I want to make today is that your career goals and your ambitions may change as you learn and develop and become a more well-rounded person in science, and that's perfectly okay. And you can always change career paths at different points in time. So some of the things that I had mentioned here as a kid, I'm doing now. I'm a teacher. I do environmental work, but it's in a different way than I perhaps envisioned when I was in 4th grade. By the time I got to high school, I had a really fantastic teacher in my biology class who he would tell us all that to teach is not to tell, to teach is to provide an opportunity to learn. And he really challenged us to think about science and biology in new ways. This was really kind of this class is really what sparked my interest in going to college to pursue a degree in biology. Prior to that, I hadn't really been sure what I was going to do when I got to college, but this class in particular and this teacher, Mr. Nijelik, really got me excited about the process of science and how we ask questions and design experiments to test those questions. So when I graduated from this high school in this tiny town in Minnesota, I decided I wanted to spread my wings a little bit, and I went to college out in Washington State at the University of Puget Sound. This college was really no bigger than my high school. It's a small liberal arts college that really focused on kind of giving you a broad education from the sciences to the humanities. When I started there, I thought I was going to be a medical doctor. I went into college thinking, let's study biology. I'm going to go to medical school and I'm going to be a doctor. And that's probably not an uncommon goal for many of you or for other people that you know in biology programs. And that's a fantastic goal to have. What I realized, though, in my first year of college is that although I thought these topics related to medicine were interesting, they weren't the topics that got me really excited and thinking about science outside of the classroom. So it was actually pretty quickly in my sophomore year that I decided to kind of go back to my roots of thinking about the natural world and how that functions and pursue more classes in ecology. So if you've ever been to Western Washington, you know this is a really fantastic place for people who like the outdoors. These are just a few pictures of trips that I went on as a college student where we were exploring different mountain regions, from Mount St. Helens that had erupted in the 1980s, Mount Rainier, the Cascades, the Olympics. And these types of trips, along with the classes I was taking, got me really interested in learning more about these high elevation environments and how the plants and animals that live there really are able to tolerate and function in these places. So as I continue today, you'll see how these early experiences in Washington have kind of influenced the types of research that I do today. I also had a very important experience as a college student in that I was able to do a research internship with Dr. Betsy Kirkpatrick. At the time, I was a little bit disappointed when I started this research internship because Betsy studied plants and I thought plants were boring. They were not something I was super excited about. They just sat in one place. They just kind of did their thing. I thought, how boring is that? I'd much rather study animals. But when I talked with Betsy, she told me about her research and how she was studying how pollinators like hummingbirds influence the fitness of these plants and how herbivory by elk alter kind of the plant-pollinator interactions. And I said, well, okay, I'll give this a try. At least I get to study herbivory and pollination and animals that way, using this model system of the plant. And this was kind of an eye-opening experience because once I got started doing this research, I realized pretty quickly how cool plants really are and how connected they are to other organisms in their ecosystems. So this kind of changed my interest from animal ecology and how animals function to really thinking about natural systems as communities and focusing more on plants as being really pivotal to those communities. So once I kind of finished my undergraduate, I decided that I wanted to pursue a career in science and that that required that I go to graduate school. So one of the reasons why Betsy was such a fantastic mentor to me is because she was really the first person that told me that I could do this as a career, that I could be a scientist, and she encouraged me to go to graduate school. So initially I decided to apply for schools in various places like Texas and Montana and a couple other, and Rhode Island. What I realized during this application process is that I still didn't quite know what I wanted to study and what I wanted to do in science. So I actually decided to take a gap year so that I could do more research in and learn a little bit more about what things really sparked my passion in biology. So I moved across the country to Rhode Island, where I had met one of the professors at Brown University, and he gave me an opportunity to work as a research technician in his lab. So while I was at Brown, I did a lot of work in marsh ecosystems that look something like this one. We studied how plant communities in these marshes are able to tolerate the salty water that inundates the marsh every day. We also studied how plants interact with each other and with herbivores and how that influences the communities. So this was a really important year for me because I really got a sense of what it means to be a graduate student, what it's like to work in a research lab, and kind of those experiences really helped me kind of refine what types of work that I wanted to do moving forward as a graduate student and eventually as a scientist in this field. So after this experience, I decided that I was ready to start graduate school, and I started thinking about where do I want to go? And that brought me back to my interest in alpine environments and the mountains out west. So I started applying to graduate school again. I thought, well, let's go back to Colorado. Let's look at Montana. Let's go to California, Washington, these places that have these beautiful mountain ranges. Where I ended up was actually central Missouri, where it's very flat. There are no mountains, but there happened to be a really fantastic research lab there that did all of their work in the Colorado Rocky Mountains. So one of the things that I would encourage you to think about as you're contemplating your own paths in science is that sometimes opportunities will arise that at first may not seem quite like what you were hoping, but they could be the best opportunities that you have to develop the skills and the interests that you want. And my time in Missouri was really, really influential in shaping who I am as a scientist. So this, as I kind of moved through my science career, I've moved across the country a couple times. I went from Washington to Rhode Island to Missouri. After that, I went to Kansas, where I worked as a postdoctoral researcher for a couple of years. And then finally, I moved here to Central New York. So one of the things that I really love about science and ecology is that it can take you a lot of places if you are interested in traveling and if you're open to those opportunities. And the other kind of piece of that is that even if you stay in one place, like now here I am in Central New York, I can do my research in lots of places across the world. So I have projects that are in Colorado, I have projects in Nevada, I have projects in lots of places and collaborators as well. So there's a lot of potential for science to really help you understand not only where you live right now, but how different places across the world kind of have the same types of unifying themes. So throughout all these experiences, I've worked in a variety of different ecosystems, from the marshes to prairies in Kansas to these alpine ecosystems out west. And that kind of brings me to where we are today in my research lab here at Syracuse University. We study mainly these high elevation ecosystems in Colorado. This is our primary field site, Pennsylvania Mountain, which is located really in central Colorado, about an hour and a half west of Denver. So it's a really beautiful landscape to get to go to, and I get to kind of combine my passion for science with my love of the outdoors and hiking. In this place, we have these really unique communities from these subalpine forests, where some of the trees in this place can be as old as 2,000 years old. And we can go all the way up to the top of the mountain, where we have these beautiful tundra meadows with this high diversity of wildflowers. So it's really kind of an amazing location to work in. As you sort of hike through these environments, you'll come across a lot of different plants and animals and insects that sort of make up this really unique community that we're trying to understand how these organisms are all kind of interacting together. Most of the work that we do in my lab focuses on plant species like these ones that make up a lot of the kind of plant diversity in alpine ecosystems. And we're especially interested in how these plants interact with soil microbes such as mycorrhizal fungi. So in this photo, all the dark blue coloring is actually fungi that's living inside the roots of plant cells, or the cells of plant roots. These fungi actually help the plant acquire nutrients from the soil environment in exchange for sugars. So one of the things that we're interested in looking at is how climate conditions affect plant microbe interactions, and also how these soil microbes can alter or mediate plant responses to climate change. So looking at these kinds of questions will help us understand and predict how alpine ecosystems might function in the future as the world continues to get warmer. The alpine is actually a really great place to look at these types of questions because climate conditions vary a lot as you go from lower to higher elevations, and even from one year to the next. So both of these pictures were taken from the same location at our field site, and you can see that in 2018, there wasn't very much snow. It was actually a very dry year, whereas in 2019, only 1 year later, we had snow all the way up until August. So it was actually a very wet, very snowy, very cold year. One of my favorite things to do is, or favorite parts about my job is actually working with students like you. So here's a picture of my graduate student who came out to Colorado with me in 2019. So you can see how much snow there was at the time that we arrived in June. I've also brought out a number of undergraduates, and it's really just kind of fun to see how students are engaging in science and learning about these ecosystems. We collect a lot of data while we're out there, and this data helps us design experiments that we can do when we come back to campus. So on campus, we have access to a lot of resources such as greenhouses and growth chambers where we can actually control the environment and grow different plant species under conditions that reflect some of the predictions we expect to see from climate change. We also can use microbes that we can culture to inoculate these plants with different soil communities, and also look at how these microbes influence plant responses to their environment. So we use kind of a wide range of approaches in my lab to try to understand kind of the connections between soil microbes, plant function, and climate. In addition to research, a large part of my job is teaching at the university. So I teach a number of classes in our life sciences building. So if you ever come to campus, this is where you would find me located. I also interact with students of all types. So not just students in the classroom, but we do a lot of informal science education through outreach programs where students from high schools and other groups might come to campus to learn about the work that we do. In some cases, we actually go out into the community and we share our research with various groups around Syracuse. And this is one of my favorite parts about being a scientist, and perhaps something you didn't realize that scientists often do, is that we are engaging and telling people about the work that we do through these types of programs. So there's some things that I wanted to share with you about what I've learned through my journey in science. And one of them, and this is I think the most important, is that career paths are not linear. There's no one way to get from point A to point B. It's more like you're hopping from one lily pad to the next. So your journey might zigzag through the pond. You might even go backwards sometimes. You might take a different path and go over to a different patch of lily pads. The point is just that you're going to encounter opportunities, and taking advantage of those opportunities and being open to those opportunities could help you get to where you want to go. So I would encourage you to think about things like internships that might pop up that could really help you understand and refine your interest in science. Those might be, kind of a zigzag moment for you in your own career path. You might also think about how your interest in science can change. So as I said, I did not start out as a plant ecologist. I thought plants were boring. But this experience that I had with Betsy really helped me see the world that I was trying to understand in a different way. And even after doing this project, I still didn't quite appreciate some of the things that I study now. So I remember having a conversation with Betsy where she told me that the future of plant ecology was going to be looking at plant microbe interactions. My response to that was, I'm never doing that because microbes are boring. And here I am, not that many years later, studying plant microbe interactions and how important they are to climate change. So, keeping an open mind about what might interest you, because your interests will change as you learn more through science. Kind of along the same lines as developing those mentoring relationships, because each of these people on the screen have had a huge impact on how I've developed as a scientist, the way I think, the opportunities I've had, and they still support me today. So when you think about your professors, the internships that you might have an opportunity to do, jobs you might be able to have in science, the people you meet in those opportunities can be a major part of your life for the entire span of your career. And I hope you can find those kinds of mentors in your own experience. And the last thing that I want to say is all of this kind of goes to helping you figure out what it is that you are passionate about. If you're going to have a career in science, it's great to be really excited about the questions that you're asking. And for me, that's thinking about how plants interact with soil microbes in these complex networks and what that means for how ecosystems respond to climate change. So I don't want to I want to leave time for questions. So I just wanted to kind of encourage you that if you have questions that you don't get answered today, that you can reach out to me through my email address, kmbecklin@syr.edu. You can also find my website located on the Syracuse University Biology webpage. I'm happy to kind of talk more about my experiences in science and how they maybe parallel some of the things that you're thinking about doing in your own careers. With that, I will just kind of leave you with a picture of Ranger and Dex and our time on the mountain. It's kind of I've been lucky in that I've been able to really find a career that allows me to combine my passions in science with the things that I like to do just for fun. So that helps make my daily life and my science life even more rewarding as I pursue these research questions. So
thank you for sharing all of that, Katie, and especially the pictures. As a lab-based cell biologist, I am quite envious of the beautiful surroundings into which your research takes you. A student had a question, and is where you found your first internship. So you laid out how important that is, but how do you find them?
That's a really, really good question, and there's actually lots of resources that I can share some of them with Dr. Hamilton to kind of to spread. But one of the things that you can do is that here in Syracuse, you have there's actually a number of universities that have regular research internship programs. So if you're interested in potentially getting involved in research, reaching out to faculty at Syracuse University, SUNY ESF, those places, or even going down towards Cornell, they're often looking for students just like you. We are looking for students who want an experience in the summer. We might be looking for students who are open to doing research during the academic year. So kind of connecting with faculty and just asking them about their research might be one way to get your foot in the door and have those opportunities. I know there's OCC also has some research internship programs that you can think about applying for. For example, my department recently did a sort of winterlude, we call it Brew at SU, where it's a 1-week research internship here at SU to get a sense of what it's like to do research. There's also, and this is what I'll send to Dr. Hamilton, is there's a number of listservs that regularly post opportunities that are internships, research experiences, technician positions, all of those things that are available to undergrads that perhaps are looking for more experience and more background in biology.
Thank you, and I will share all of that with our students. The follow-up question to that is, how many internships did you apply to before you got one?
That's, it kind of depends on what type of internship you're applying for. I actually got the research internships that I applied for the first time. And that was partly because the first one I applied to was through my university, which was a small school where they were really, kind of dedicated to getting students those opportunities. So there was a program on campus that helped me do that. But when you're starting to apply to kind of national internships, it's okay for the answer to be no. Just keep trying. There's so many opportunities out there that, you might have a few people tell you no, but one of those opportunities will likely come through. So, yeah, one of the things you learn in science is just kind of sometimes the answer is no, but perseverance kind of helps carry the day.
And we are also fortunate at OCC to have a number of resources available to students to support them. We have career services, which is one route to obtain an internship. Some departments have their own internship specialist, which in biology happens to be me. And then there are also our school specialists, which is Dr. Feeney for the School of Science. And if you approach any of us, all of us can help and guide you in finding lists of internships, how to go about that, making sure your resume is up to date, finding contacts. And then actually our next question is related, and you seem to have this sort of lineup of wonderful mentors who have become friends and supporters. And someone asked, how do you find them? Right? Do you can't just go up to somebody and say, would you like to be my mentor?
Actually, you can. Okay. So, you're meeting people every day that could potentially be a mentor for you. So your professors that you have in class, people that you meet on campus, people that come give a seminar like this one, you can always ask for mentoring advice, and that might lead to a longer term relationship that is like what I talked about today, where those people have been in my life for decades now. But yeah, there's no harm in asking, and you're meeting people every day that could potentially serve those mentorship roles. One thing I will say is that you're probably going to need more than one mentor, because not every person can be all things to you. So I have someone who is really a field research mentor who helps me think about questions that I can answer in the field. I have somebody else who's a teaching mentor. I have someone else who is a networking mentor. So each of these people, they're really good at different things, and I reach out to them with different types of questions.
By and large, I have found scientists to be kind and approachable, and we are all just a bunch of nerds doing things that we love, and we love to talk about the things that we do. So perhaps that initial quip was right. Do just ask people. Do ask people if they can be of any help to you. And then the last question we have is, do you enjoy what you do, and does it ever get boring, especially since at the very beginning of your career you said, I will never do that, and here you are?
Yes, I do enjoy what I do quite a bit. I will say and I think this is true about any field in science, there's always boring tasks. But if you're excited about the question, that really helps those boring tasks seem more exciting. So one of the things that I don't really enjoy doing is microscopy work, because it can take me hours and hours of time. But using the microscope is a skill that I've had to develop because it's so central to my questions. So looking at plant microbe interactions, I can't do that if I can't see the microbes. So I have to use some of these tools that, I'm not excited about, but I can be really excited about the question.
I do agree. I think that is perhaps true of every single job out there. There are parts that are less enjoyable. Do you have any parting words for our students, especially considering that our students are very much at the beginning of their own journeys and there are a lot of unknowns?
One of the things that I kind of mentioned this earlier, but those unknowns are opportunities that might take you on a different path or a zigzag path towards your career goal. And sometimes those sort of unexpected opportunities are the ones that can be the most rewarding. So, like I said, I thought I was going to go to medical school and become a doctor. I am a doctor. I just am a different kind of doctor. I have a PhD instead of an MD. Back when I was a kid, I thought I was going to be a teacher, and I am a teacher. I'm just a different kind of teacher than I thought. And so, might be that the things that you're not sure of right now are sort of opportunities in disguise for you to really figure out what you're passionate about. So being open to what those opportunities are and kind of giving yourself permission to not be sure of what you want to do. I think those are really good things to keep in mind, because it's really hard when you are at the stage that you are in your careers to know everything. Otherwise, why are you at school? So being open to those goals changing and being refined with the opportunities you have, I think, is a really important way to think about your career path in science.
That is perhaps better parting words than I could come up with. So I'd like to thank you very much for taking time out of your, no doubt, very busy schedule and talking to our students today. We will be back in March with another seminar, and we will hear from one of OCC's own. We will hear from Nikia Dennis in the School of Health. Thank you for watching today. Bye-bye.